Okay, so now we're at part three. So last time I was talking about like why wouldn't they want to compare data from women leaders today, right? Compared with these queens, right? And the thing is, when you're talking about leadership, queens are not the only kinds of women who were in positions of leadership. So that's another problem I almost forgot to mention, right? They weren't mentioning the different kinds of leadership positions that women held and the responsibilities that came with those positions, uh, which is another problem. However, and this is where I get back to the reading here, there are more women in leadership positions today than at any time in our past. We would have a much larger data set from which to make better judgments about who are the better leaders, wouldn't we? Right? Because these women would be coming from the general population. See, it's not fair to take 28 women of only one class who were all raised and conditioned by men to be leaders. Right? They were raised and conditioned by the men around them in their society. They had to constantly, whenever they made a decision, they had to do it with men's approval in the back of their brains. So when you have a large data set, a larger one, instead of just 28 Caucasoid women who happen to be born in royalty, well, what happens when we enlarge that data set and we actually take a look at a much bigger group, especially over a more recent period of time? What would we find? And I'll answer that in a moment. I left a few articles that showed that women were better leaders during COVID-19. They did a better job leading during the C-19 crisis than the men did. So there are two articles like that. You can find them here. There's also research that women are effective are effective in leadership positions, and women CEOs are leading about 10% of Fortune 500 companies. So that's like 1/10 of companies. That's pretty impressive. Now here's the article that basically crushes this article right here from Forbes crushes that article, which is hilarious. And what ended up about, and I'm taking a quote here because this made me laugh. Quote, men, and by the way, this data was taken from analyzing women and male leaders, political leaders from 1875 to 2004. So this is data taken from over 130 years, about 130 years or so. So it's about that. I think it's 129. So they took data from something that was a little over 100 years old. I don't want to say a little bit, just a slight nudge above. And what they found was, in quote, men were responsible for 694 acts of aggression and 86 wars, while women were responsible for just 13 acts of aggression and only one war. Well, how about that? By the way, these are people, these are world leaders. So in down below it says, authors of the book Why Leaders Fight analyzed every world leader from 1875 to 2004 and statistically examined gender differences in military aggression. They found that 36% of the female leaders initiated at least one militarized dispute, while only 30% of male leaders did the same. So in other words, what they were saying was, yes, technically, when it came to the women, they initiated about 6% more for one dispute. But what they failed to tell you, and it's because of how they're presenting the data, because in a way they're trying to make it seem like, see, they could both be just as bad, right? Actually, it's the case that the men are initiating way more of these fucking, what do they call them? These disputes. They're initiating way more of these military disputes than the women are. So even though women do initiate them at a rate of 6, they initiate one of them at a rate that's 6% greater, they aren't initiating as many military disputes as men are. Remember, men are responsible for 694 acts of aggression, whereas the women of these leaders were only responsible for 13. They started 86 wars, while women only started one. So, now that we have a large data set, what conclusions can we draw? Even though the women leaders initiated at least one military dispute and were 36% versus 30%, the male leaders were way more aggressive. 694 acts versus 13 acts. This is why you can't judge women leaders based on 28 Caucasoid queens over the span of 400 to 500 years. That doesn't give us a good picture, and that's not a fair way to judge women in positions of leadership, especially political leadership. And this one actually shocked me because I was surprised at how seriously I was actually shocked because I thought, hey man, at least maybe women would have 10 wars under their belt. But no. Men's were credited with starting 86 to 1. Just to give you an idea of what kind of math would be involved here, if you were to take 1 divided by a 100, you would have 0.01. That's like 1%. I'm pretty sure that this is less than 1%. Or if it's not that, it's like really fucking like really tiny. We're talking about, I don't know. I don't remember my math right here. I probably need to pull out calc because I suck at like computation. But 86 wars. And women only started one of those motherfuckers. One. But you people want to say and judge women leaders and say women cause more wars based on what 28 Caucasoid women did for whatever reasons they did them for. However, we have a more modern article on political leaders from the past 129 or so years that basically prove that actually no, women are not starting as many wars. Women are not engaging in as many acts of aggression. So therefore, the conclusions that previous article, the one I'm addressing, is trying to respond to, are false. The sample size is just too small because once we started using a much larger sample size of political leaders, then we started seeing that there were actual differences. So between men and women. That being that the women are more peaceful as leaders than the men. By that, women are less likely as political leaders to initiate wars. They are less likely to initiate as many acts of political aggression. Or not political aggression, what was it? They're less okay, I think they said disputes, military disputes. Women are less likely to initiate multiple military disputes, whereas men do. So, for example, a woman may throw a punch. A man will leave 100 bodies in his wake. That's the difference between women as political leaders versus men as political leaders. Women as political leaders have a tendency overall to be more peaceful. And actually, the data does prove that they're more of a pacifying force. So to try to draw upon European queens over the past few hundred years, I mean, it's actually a complete disconnect from what's going on in the current era, but it's also just been proven false. I'll leave an article to this so you can basically see the truth. Because what this person said was, they're basically trying to look at kings and queens and use these two groups, and then based on those groups, draw the conclusion that women are somehow more aggressive than men, or women are somehow more violent than men. This is actually something in statistics I was warned about by one of my professors, and it has to do with cherry picking data. In other words, they limited the data set to only one particular type of not only ethnic group, but they limited the data to a particular type of political structure, a particular culture. So when you limit everything to just these things, there's plenty of other variables aside from their gender that could explain why they were waging these wars. And it's obvious that when you see the Forbes article from 2023, that with a much larger data set and more information to go off of, we actually said, no, it's actually the case that it's 694 for men and 13 for women for acts of aggression, and it's 86 wars for men and only 1 war for women. So yes, actually, it is factually correct to say that women are far less aggressive than men. They might have the same potentiality for getting into war, but they don't act, and they might have could have the same potentiality for aggression. But in reality, when it comes right down to it, they are not acting on their aggression in anywhere near the same rate as the men do. The men are the far more aggressive group. They're the group that's more likely to wage these wars. So even though it's true, men did not wage all these wars throughout history, they're more likely to wage more wars than women do, and they're more likely to engage in more acts of aggression than women do in positions of political leadership when they are world leaders. And okay, now I'm just going to kind of wrap this up. I'm going to make sure I have enough time for closing remarks here. So I'm basically done here. I've thoroughly crushed this article and provided an article from a much larger data set that demonstrates how women in positions of authority do, in fact, cause less wars and are far less aggressive overall. As it turns out, sample sizes, culture, and upbringing matter. You can try to get your way around this, but it's not going to work, because you can't just take a classroom size. Imagine judging millions of people based on 28 individuals. 28. They're somehow supposed to be representative in every way, shape, and form of all women political leaders, right? They're supposed to be representative of all of them. But that's simply not the case. This article is easily one of the worst that I've read in recent years, and it not only did it not change my mind, I think it was actually done. This whole thing was done as a way to try to make, and I sincerely question the motive behind the selection. Why were they selecting only these types of women? Why not select other types? Like, what possible motive would you have for something like that? Unless, of course, you were trying to push or forward the conclusion that you wanted, right? That you wanted from the beginning. I highly suspect that that's the case, that the people who were looking into these articles, or the people who were writing these, they want desperately to believe that either men and women are equal, or that somehow women are actually worse than men, when more recent data, more relevant data towards the current era suggests otherwise, suggests that actually no. At least as far as these wars go. I mean, again, it depends on what your idea of a good leader is, because you can get into that subject matter all day long and say, no, a good leader does this or this or that. So you can argue what qualities make somebody a good leader, whether you're a Gynarchist, a feminist, male supremacist, whatever it is, right? But one thing you cannot argue is that women are somehow more aggressive or cause more wars than men, while also somehow omitting the other political leaders that existed during these time periods, or not looking at a much larger data set and seeing, oh, okay, this is just representative of these Caucasoids. This is just representative of these monikers, or this could just be representative of the way this class behaves when it has power. There could be any number of reasons for this violence, and it doesn't necessarily have to be due to them being women. But when we see that, oh, wait a second, now that we have this larger data set, and it's actually saying, no, the opposite is true. So my conclusion is that there's other reasons for the violence. That's what I think. And that the people trying to draw the conclusion of the article, I'm going to have to go to a part 4. Damn it.